I remember one night Mike was putting Enya, our oldest, to bed, and I'm in a room with the door shut, nursing Sky, the newborn, and I can hear Enya's tantrum just getting more and more epic. And I'm trying to relax, but I'm like getting more and more frustrated
Mm,
to the point where I just snap and I scream at the top of my lungs behind a closed door
yeah.
for Enya to just shut up and go to bed. And Sky stops nursing and looks at me, and she just, this horrific little baby face is just crying. And I'm like, this has to change. We can't continue doing this anymore.
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm your host, Megan Van Diepender, and this is the Empowerhood Podcast. I am so happy to have you here. You know, motherhood is hard, and we are going to talk about all of the hard things that just are not talked about enough. So, buckle up and enjoy this episode. All right. So, hi, Natalie.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So, everyone listening in today, we have Natalie Hixson here with us, and she is going to tell us all about her motherhood journey and how she overcame destructive anger as a parent. So, I'm so excited to get into this subject today, Natalie. Why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about you? Who is Natalie?
Yeah, so I live in Bozeman, Montana with my high school sweetheart and two of my three girls. My oldest is in college in Tennessee now.
Okay.
But yeah, I am a life coach for mamas who are trying to overcome destructive anger and burnout, and it all stems from my story and where it all began with me. So I'll just jump right into that.
Yeah.
So I grew up with parents who the way that they experienced anger was it was yelling, it was um, slamming doors, it was just kind of destructive and loud, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up not liking it, but I just thought that was normal because both
Mm-hmm.
of my parents were that way. Fast forward to when I got married to Mike. When we moved in together, I was that way, and he was completely opposite. He was quiet. He would withdraw, and I can remember yelling at him in a fight, like, "Why won't you yell back at me?"
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that's not what I do.
Right.
So I started to see a big difference at that point, and I didn't like it, but I was like, well, this is just who I am. It's part of my history. I'm Scottish Irish blood. We yell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but then when we had our first daughter, I started to notice, especially around the age of 2, that my anger was really getting I was it was controlling me.
Okay.
And you could literally find us both on the floor throwing 2-year-old tantrums.
Wow.
It's not pretty. This is like the most raw and most unbeautiful part of this story. But I was very abusive. I mean, I would scream at her and I'd belittle her and I would spank her too hard. I'd leave little bruises on her arm from squeezing her too tight. I was a very scary mommy, and I don't share that lightly.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
difficult to like be in that place, and I share that because I know there's other moms out there experiencing that. And it's so easy to be in that place and think you're the worst human in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody knows, they're going to take your kids away from you. And I share my story to offer hope that there's a place to change. You can change, you're not stuck, and you can overcome this. But
Yes.
continuing on my journey, when we had her sister a few years later, she was about um, 4 years old when we brought her home. I remember one night Mike was putting Enya, our oldest, to bed, and I'm in a room with the door shut, nursing Sky, the newborn, and I can hear Enya's tantrum just getting more and more epic. And I'm trying to relax, but I'm like getting more and more frustrated
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I just snap and I scream at the top of my lungs behind a closed door
Yeah.
for Enya to just shut up and go to bed. And Sky stops nursing and looks at me, and she just, this horrific little baby face is just crying. And I'm like, this has to change. We can't continue doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And at that point, I felt like I'd tried everything. I'd read books. I'm Christian, so I'd been praying. I was like, please change me. But I just felt hopeless every night. I'd cry going to bed and wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and just mess up the next day. So I decided that the way to fix things would be to take Enya to therapy because if Enya could stop throwing tantrums, then I wouldn't get upset. That
Yes.
was my logic.
Yeah.
Um, so we did. We took her to therapy, and the therapist met with her and observed her, and then she met with us. And she said that Enya was perfectly normal for her age and development. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but you're not at home with her. And she said, I understand that, but Natalie, I really think you need to be in here, not her. And that was just kind of a wait, what? Um, but at the same time, really deep down inside, I felt like somebody was telling me there is hope
Yeah.
and you can change and we can work through this.
Hmm.
And so I went to, it was psychoanalysis therapy. I did that for 4 years. I learned a lot about myself and my
Yeah.
past and kind of the way I tick and why. But I left therapy still having patterns of destructive behavior. And I want to talk about the difference between destructive behavior and normal anger in a minute. Um, but it got the ball rolling for me. You know, it was
Yeah.
somebody validating you can change, you
Yep.
have the ability to do this, continue. And for me, it was walking in my faith and it was walking through various different trials and businesses and stuff that
Hmm.
just personal development that continued to get me into a better place. And then, really, when I started coaching moms through anger and burnout, that's when it elevated even more for me because I
Hmm.
was then accountable to the people I'm coaching.
Yeah.
And through coaching them, I found more and more techniques on how to help. And I'm by far perfect today, but it is so much better than it ever has been.
Yeah.
And those destructive outbursts have stopped. And it's just the guilt and the shame, I've been able to let go of that and the relationship I have, especially with my oldest, since she's the one who endured the most from me.
Yeah.
Um, a really sweet moment came for me last year, even when I went to spend some time with her at college, and I was trying to just make sure I wasn't in her space, didn't want to get in her,
Yeah.
way, and and I said, if I'm in your way too much or anything, let me know. And she's like, Mom, having you here makes my stress levels go down. Like, it's so good to have you here. And to
That's so
hear those
nice.
words
Yeah.
and think about where we were when she was 2. I mean, I get emotional just talking about it now. It's just beautiful in the way that things can change
Yeah.
and we're never too far gone, we aren't
Right.
stuck. We can overcome.
Yeah, you can overcome and you can always repair too, right? You can repair with
Yes.
your children. And yeah,
Yes.
first of all, thank you so much for sharing that because I can't imagine that it's easy to talk about, such a dark period in your life.
Mhm.
And it will help so many people. And I truly do think we all have moments like that where we just snap. It might not be on like a regular basis, but just where it just gets to be too much. And yeah, I have so many questions around all of this stuff because, of course, as moms, we have a ton of guilt, a ton of shame. We carry that around with us, every single day. And a lot of that I feel like comes from when we have these moments where we do lose our patience and we get angry and we yell and then we feel like crap about it and we're like we'll do better tomorrow, but then somehow we always end up back there. So I'd love to
Yeah.
pick your brain about that stuff and just like how did you start getting out of that pattern?
Hmm. Well, so I want to bring in that piece of destructive versus normal,
Mm,
right? So that destructive anger really comes up when we're feeling out of control. We feel like we need to
mm-hmm.
protect ourselves. We need someone to do something that they're not doing, which is very often with
Yes.
raising children, right?
Yes.
And so we get to a point where if we haven't learned how to process how we're feeling and create more awareness around these triggers,
Mm-hmm.
we end up just exploding. And
Yeah.
maybe there's absolutely people I work with even who come to me and exploding isn't their thing. It's the passive aggressive behavior, it's
Mm-hmm.
the withdrawing that they
Okay.
struggle with,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So that all leads into the destructive behavior is yelling, screaming, belittling, physical abuse, silent treatment. It can be snarky comments, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be any of these things that we're doing that hurt the relationship and that
Yes.
we're trying to do. And in the moment, it feels really relieving to let it out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an endorphin rush to just scream at the top of our lungs,
Yeah.
but at the same time, immediately following, we have all that guilt for doing it, right?
Yes. Yes.
Whereas normal anger, especially for moms, we're irritated. We might have to raise our voice to get our kids' attention, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, we might have to take those deep breaths and just let them know, I'm frustrated right now, and
Mm-hmm.
we're getting to a place. And there's many times where I'd be like, well, when I was growing and getting healthier, and even to this day, I'm really frustrated right now, and you're not the problem, but we have a problem. We need to work through this challenge.
Okay.
But right now, I need to go calm down before I can talk to you,
Okay.
right? Or you need to go calm down before
Right.
we can talk, right?
Right.
So it's okay to feel anger, and that's a big deal.
Yep.
A lot of times we think just because we're feeling angry, we're bad, whereas it really has to do with that's a feeling,
Yeah.
that's normal.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with our feeling,
Okay.
right?
Right. So it's how you channel that anger over
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
like feeling it. Because I mean, it's an emotion, right? So you can't just like
Yes.
get rid of anger. And I also
Yeah.
like, so as we're talking about triggers, triggers come from where? Our childhood or like, because we can't really get rid of triggers, can we?
Well, it just depends on like exactly where we're at, but as far as triggers, a lot of things, the way I kind of look at triggers is what are those things that are creating like getting you to this point,
Mm.
right? There's patterns that we have that we've developed. Like in my story, you hear the pattern very obviously. My parents processed anger in a destructive way,
Yes.
right? And so I picked that up.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned to, and I can even remember my mom telling me, it's okay to yell. That's how you vent,
Right.
and so I really learned that this was okay. But then when I got married and recognized this isn't normal,
Yeah.
right? Or healthy, especially when you have children. So to to the point of triggers, um, I like to really create a lot of awareness around what is triggering you the most, right?
Okay.
So a lot of times, you might be able just to sit there and think, maybe it's bedtime, maybe it's getting out of the house, maybe it's dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of these common triggers? Getting into the car, if we have littles, getting them into the car and getting
Yeah.
them out the door, that can be very
Getting out the door
triggering.
on time. Yeah, that's always one
Hmm.
because you're in a time restraint. Yeah.
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 But then there's also other events in our life that can be going on that can be triggering us. Maybe you're getting upset over things that you haven't really ever gotten upset over, and you're not giving credit to the fact that maybe you just had a death in the family,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you were scrolling social media and saw some news that just totally gave you anxiety, right?
Yep.
And then you turn around and your kiddo's just coming to ask a normal question. You're like, what? What do you want?
Yeah.
So it's learning how to be more in a place of awareness and more in the moment with how we're feeling, instead of if we don't stop and think about these things, we just kind of go along our business and we keep
Yeah.
getting upset and we keep getting in this cycle. So I
Right.
really like to bring awareness to triggers. And one of the things that you can download for free, I think you have a link for that, for my
Yes.
at my website, you can download a trigger tracker. And so what I suggest is take one of those common triggers, or if you just got upset recently,
Mm-hmm.
take that event and go down and process through what's going on for you. And it asks you, what did you do? What was going on for you?
Mm.
What was going on for the other person? And I know you speak a lot about health in your podcast and what
Yeah.
when you're thinking about these things, and sleep. And so are you hormonal? Did you not get enough sleep?
Yeah.
Have you missed a few meals, or are your kids hangry, or
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
looking at it from that. And then kind of like how do you want this to look in the future? Like if
Okay.
this event happens again, how do you want to process this in a more healthy way? What would that look like for you?
Okay.
So we're really just creating awareness by asking ourselves these questions. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, well, just asking yourself a bunch of questions, how's that do anything? It really does help you refocus when you
Yeah.
start to
Oh,
think about
yeah.
these things.
I think so too.
Hmm.
Just like, becoming more curious about like, why am I angry right now? Like, what?
Yeah.
Because I've heard too that, like, when you get angry with your child or are triggered by something, sometimes it reflects how you are. And that's why you're triggered by
Yes.
that. So
Yes.
I know for myself, I'm like, all right, what is she doing right now that I don't like about myself? And I know it's hard to kind of
Mhm.
like zone in and be like, you're angry, right? So it's like I got to zone in and think about myself for a second and like, what is she doing that really bothers me that maybe I do too? And instead of getting
Yeah.
angry, being like, okay, I do that and I don't like that about myself, but like, how can I help her in this moment? Because I think you're right. A lot of the times, it's not even what the child is doing, right? It's like something outside our control. Are you stressed at work? Are you late? Did you not eat? Are you trying to get something done and your child is like causing a scene or, causing a
Hmm.
problem? It's like all these outside factors that are causing you to be angry at this person that is trying to talk to you right now, but it's really not their fault, right?
Yeah,
Especially if they're
absolutely.
really little, it's definitely not their fault. It doesn't make it any easier. I like don't know. I mean, do you think it makes it easier to kind of
Well,
zone in and
it gets really complex because a lot of times too, when somebody's upset, we take it upon ourselves, like it's our problem too. So, and then when we're dealing with our kids, we're looking at them like, if you would just calm down, my life would be easier right now.
Mhm.
And stop making this about me. And they're
Right.
not making it about you.
Mhm.
It's what's going on for them and their age and development. Like she said to me in the therapy office, this is normal for her age and development. And I'll tell
Yeah.
moms, go look at your kids' age and development. Go look it up online.
Yeah.
See what's normal for them because sometimes we look at that and we, like you're saying, we take their behavior and we think it's because of us.
Yeah.
It's either something we did and they're modeling it from, they learned that from us. I'm like, actually, that's normal human behavior.
Yeah.
And we are the ones who need to grow in our emotional maturity.
Mhm.
We're seeing our kids throw a tantrum, but like you hear my story, I was throwing the 2-year-old tantrum. I was on the floor screaming and crying with her, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so I was like stuck in this maturity level that I needed to
Yeah.
grow, and
Yeah.
you're the adult. And so there's things like when in the heat of the moment, when you're really upset,
Mhm.
um, I like to do what I call sit and pee, or sit and pray is how I kind of teach it. But
Yeah.
P, you can shorten it up. And here's how it goes. It's acronym. So sit is S is stop,
Yep.
separate yourself if you can. The P is in there to like go to the bathroom if you can,
Yep.
right? If it's safe to leave your kids, if they're old enough that you can and do that. If you can't, if you have to stay in the room, change your position. Maybe you are on the couch, move to the floor, or move across the room, but do
Yep.
something to just separate yourself for a minute.
Mhm.
Take a deep breath. That's the I, the inhale. And then there's tune in. It's okay that I'm upset right now.
Mhm.
Why am I upset right now? It's okay that they're feeling upset right now. Why are they upset right now?
Yeah.
So we're validating us. We're looking at the situation. We're just trying to stay in the moment because if we can stay in awareness and keeping our mind focused in the moment, that helps us not get to that escalated part where we're just checking out in rage, right?
Okay.
So we're trying to work into that just to reset.
Okay.
And then if you're, of faith, you can pray. If not, meditate, whatever it is for you,
Yep.
but take that moment and just, I need strength right now,
Yes.
right? And so then we're able to come back into that moment after we've had that reset. And not always, but many times we can come back and be like, okay, what's going on? What do we need to change? How do we need to work through this challenge?
Mhm.
And then we're taking it, and looking at it from a more mature angle. And
Okay.
another thing that I'll say when you're feeling upset, if the only thing you can do is take a deep breath, great. But say, what's productive and what's responsible right now?
Okay.
What can I do that's productive and responsible?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's keeping our mindset in a healthier place while feeling the emotions and validating it's okay, I'm angry right now.
Yeah.
Anyone would be angry in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it was just Sunday. We were trying to get out the door to go to church, and my daughter was fighting with me about brushing her hair. And she was like yelling at me, and I was like, stop yelling. But then, like, not even like 30 seconds later, I'm like, so I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally contradicting myself. Like, I just told her not to
Right.
yell, and then I'm yelling, and it's like,
Right.
I did take deep breaths after a while, and we, talked about it, and it ended up being fine. But, just moments like that where you instantly regret them, right? I was like,
Hmm.
why am I yelling right now? Like, yes, it's super frustrating, but like, this is just hair. Like, I need to like choose my battles. It's something deeper. And I know I did think
Yeah.
about it and I figured out what it was deeper. It it was something about me, just like I said.
Right.
um, but I instantly regretted it, and we're like on our way to church to go, learn and grow with God. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm acting like such a jerk and like a horrible parent. And it
Mm,
just, the message actually felt like towards me, I felt like in church. So it ended up being it all good and whatnot. But just like you said, I needed to kind of separate myself, and I couldn't. I was in the car. So I did take some deep breaths and was able to talk to
hmm.
her in a regular voice. And we kind of do the same things in situations when my daughter, is feeling, anger or out of control. And we're like, all right, you're going to take a minute or two to go sit by yourself and just think about what's going on, and then come back to us and talk to us in a respectful, manner when we can talk about this.
Yeah,
So it really
absolutely.
goes both ways. And we're not perfect, right? I mean, you said you're far from perfect, and I think that was actually one of my questions, because it's like we're not ever going to be perfect. Like, how do we get rid of these thoughts of like guilt, inadequacy, when we do go through these moments? Like, what do you think of when this happens for you?
Yeah. So partly for me, because of my faith, I have to turn those over and surrender those to God
Yeah.
and just recognize that my kids are also on their own journey. And just like I had to learn from the mistakes of my parents, and grow from them, they're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to grow from the mistakes of mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And grow from them. And by being a parent who, like my girls, all three of them know my story. What I'm
Yeah.
telling you today, they've heard.
Yeah.
And I've told them, especially as they get older, like Enya, I said, Enya, as you continue to grow in your life, whether you have kids, if you have kids, it could come then. It may never
Mm-hmm.
come up for you, but if anything ever comes up for you, and you recall things from your childhood that felt hurtful for me, or you don't understand, you have questions, you need to know
Mm-hmm.
you can come talk to me about them without me attacking you or denying it. I recognize I made a mistake, and I want you to be able to grow. And
Yeah.
if talking to me helps, then, so just being open and honest with them,
Okay.
but also just recognizing there's there's things from our past that sometimes we need to really take a look at,
Yeah.
right? And there's people maybe we need to forgive, including ourselves and the things
Yeah.
that we've done,
Yeah.
because resentment can really create a lot of boundaries like that we just don't feel like we can cross, and we're just in this self-protective coping place,
Yeah.
and that's how we've grown up. And so being able to break down those walls, and a lot of times it comes from looking at our past and going, what happened? What patterns am I still living through?
Yeah.
I like to think of it like glasses. What lenses are am I seeing this through right now, right?
Yeah.
And so there is some of that hard work that we have to do sometimes, especially if we're stuck in a place like I was, where it was just this endless cycle of rage and guilt and shame.
Right.
So
Right.
it's rolling our sleeves up and doing some of that hard work to overcome some of that.
Yeah.
And then just walking through recovery, which is that taking responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for what we're doing and what we've done. Like in the beginning in my story, Enya had to change. And I recognized quickly in that therapy office, it's me who has to make that
Yeah.
change. I
Yeah.
can't change anyone else around me, but I
Right.
can change my reactions by working through this other stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, kids learn the most just by watching us, right? I mean, that's like almost the baggage that we have is from watching our parents, right? And it's not like they were consciously doing things to us to
Right.
make us make mistakes when we're older. It's just life, right? It's all we know because that's who we're around the most. So, I
Hmm.
mean, just being aware of how you're acting is actually more of an influence to your child than talking to them probably at an age of like 2, 3, 4 years old. Really, they're going to learn more from just observing.
Yeah,
Um,
and they need to see that it's okay to make mistakes. Even
yes.
when I make a mistake with one of my kids, even to this day, if I say something, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said that.
Hmm.
And instead of living in this place of, oh, I'm such a terrible human, you don't want to be so careful what you're saying about yourself.
Yes.
Instead of spiraling in this self-pity, we need to rise above it and go, I'm sorry. I apologize for how I
Apologize.
just spoke to you.
Yeah.
Please forgive me, and move on. And what you're doing in that moment is showing your kids you make mistakes.
Hmm.
You apologize
Hmm.
and you move on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they, if you are a perfect parent and you never have a mistake, then I have moms who come to me and they're like, my parents never got upset. I never saw any conflict in my house and I can't
Yeah.
understand why I'm angry. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
they're feeling guilt and shame for having any emotion at
Right.
all,
That was what it
right?
was like in my house. Yeah. I mean, I can't say there
Yeah,
was never a conflict, but we're just not a confrontational type of family. So I really had to work with being able to express my emotions and know that it was going to be okay to be able to
yeah,
express those. Like, my husband's not going to leave me. He's not going to be mad at me. It's really like, even my daughter, like, just being able to talk about emotions and not make it like a thing. Just it's
yeah,
normal just to talk about emotions. And going back to what you
absolutely.
said about apologizing, I feel like being able to apologize after I made mistakes really, really changed that guilt aspect for me. Because
Hmm.
knowing that you can always repair, this doesn't make it okay, to talk
Right.
to someone like that. But I mean, we're going to make mistakes. It's going to
Yep.
happen. We're not perfect. So just
Hmm.
knowing that I could go and apologize and we could talk it out and forgive each other, that really took the beat myself up part out of it, that I didn't have to beat myself into the ground, call myself a bad mom, do all these things to myself, talk down to myself. That got rid of that for me, where I knew I could be like, I'm going to think through this, what bothered me on a deeper level, and then I'm going to go apologize to my daughter, because it probably wasn't her fault. I mean, is she perfect? No, but like, there's more to the story than just like yelling and getting angry always. Even
Right.
on her part too. Usually when she gets angry, it might be something else going on, something happened at school that she didn't want to talk about, stuff like that. So it's like
Yeah,
that really got rid of that, you're a horrible mother type of thing for me, and it really, really helps. So I highly recommend just knowing that you can always repair no matter what you did.
yes.
I mean, even just hearing your story, knowing what you did and still being able to repair your relationship with your daughter,
Hmm.
it's just huge. It's definitely life changing. I feel like it's a great start to getting rid of those like shameful feelings after you mess up, because you're gonna mess up.
Absolutely. And we always focus on the mess ups. We
Hmm.
aren't ever really focusing on what do we do that's right? What do we do that's
Yeah.
good? And our kids know that we love them
Yeah.
and we show them love. We need to focus on those things, like what's good. My clients, every day, they have to fill out a little daily tracker because I like to see where they're at and
Yeah.
just holistically. And one of the things they have to do is write three things about your day, about you, your motherhood, anything
Yeah.
that was good today.
Yep.
Focus on those good things because we often just want to hone in on what we're doing wrong, and then that's where
Hmm.
our focus is.
Right.
Then we continue to act out on that point of focus instead of let's
Exactly.
point out the good things. Let's
Yeah.
let's point out how we want to grow in a healthier way.
Yeah, I mean, I think visualization too is huge, and really just thinking what you want to happen too, instead of
Yep.
thinking of the past and what you did wrong. What do you want your relationship to look like with your child, or how do you want to be as a mom? Like, I know on your website it says, like, show up as the mom that you want to be. Like, who do you want to be? Because, like you said, a
Hmm.
lot of times we're so stuck in the negative, even with our children. Like, we're so focused on what they're doing wrong so we can correct them instead of focusing on all like the amazing things that they're doing right. And I feel like when you shift that focus, which is really hard because maybe it's how we were brought up or whatnot, just to think more of the negative than the positive, but our thoughts
Hmm.
are what is actually going to happen. We have to, like,
Yep.
put ourselves in the right direction by starting to think those thoughts that we actually want to come true. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I even use that for sleep. It's like, how do you want to sleep? Write it
Mm.
down in detail before you go to bed, because a lot of times our mind is getting in the way of, what we actually want to happen in the world. It's like the same thing with money. It's the same thing with health and nutrition and all these things. You have to get there mentally first before it's going to happen for you.
Yeah, I think it's Brooke Castillo who she talks about. She's a life coach and teaches life coaches.
Mm-hmm.
But she's got a self-coaching model and it's talking about how we have a set of circumstances and our thoughts come from that and our feelings
Mm-hmm.
come from our thoughts and then our actions come from our feelings. So
Yes.
our thoughts are going to improve our actions every time. And
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
important to where are we putting our
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, and it's it's self-talk too, right? I mean, it's not only like visualizing what you want for the future, but it's like, how are you talking to yourself? Because this is
Yes.
going to really show up in how you feel. Because if you're not talking kindly to yourself or promoting positivity, in who you are and as a mom, then it's not going to show up in your day with your feelings, right?
Yeah, there's an exercise I'll have my clients do about negative self-talk. And I'm like, okay, so I want you to be aware of it this week. You're not going to
Hmm.
catch every thought, but I want
Right.
you to catch as many as you can, write them down. And then after a week or two of writing some of your negative thoughts down, I want you to sit down and write the opposite of that.
Okay.
And so what it does is it creates this like, wow, I think negative about myself a lot.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about it unless you're being aware of it, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what these exercises are meant to do. And then you're like, okay, but that's not how you want to think about yourself. So how can we improve this? What's the opposite of that? Let's start focusing
Yeah.
on what we want, even though we don't feel like we can achieve it. We don't feel like we are that. We
Hmm.
have to let go of our feelings in that way and go, this is what I want. This is what I want to focus on. What does a mom who works through a situation about what does a mom who's got more patience and is a bit more calm when getting
Hmm.
out of the house, how does she work through her day? There's a
Yeah.
little more preparation, there's
Yeah.
some deep breaths, there's some letting them win the battle,
Yeah.
you
Like,
know?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're taking those things and just looking at it and going, what does that look like? And if you
Yeah.
honestly can't find out, go search on the internet or go ask a friend
Right.
who you
Right.
think might be doing that well. What are you thinking or how are you getting through these challenges,
Yeah.
right? Because I
Yeah.
get stuck in this area.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great exercise just because sometimes I think we don't even think, like, what do we want? Because we're either so busy or just so in this pattern that we're not even like thinking, like, how do I want my life and my home and like how we interact in the home to even look like? We really
Mm.
have to bring that down and like really think about it. And I think just doing that exercise and like becoming aware, if it is becoming aware of negative thoughts and that kind of brings your attention to, how do I want my house to be, then that's great. I mean, it all starts with awareness, right? I mean, that's with
Mm-hmm.
anything. If you're not aware of something, then you can't change it. So you have to
Yes.
become aware of it first. So yeah, I love that. I love writing down just like thoughts too. And I know one year, my husband and I can't remember the guy that wrote the book, but he wrote a book about complaining, and he did this like challenge where you had to wear a band. So he sold these like rubber bands, and you had to keep it on your wrist. And if you complained, you had to turn it to the other wrist. And so the goal
Oh,
was to not complain and to keep it on your wrist for I think it was like 30 days or something like that. So 30 days with no complaints. So we tried
yeah.
this. It was crazy. It was almost like what you said about the negative thoughts, because like I was like, 1 hour in and I had already moved it over like a couple different times. I'm like, wow, I really complain a lot. And I had no idea. So again,
Yeah.
just like doing like, I mean, do what works for you, but do an exercise that is going to bring your awareness to, how you talk to yourself, negative thoughts towards
Mm-hmm.
your family or children or life, anything, even money. Like so many people have issues with financials and money because their mind is holding them back, not necessarily like their job or
Right.
and same thing goes with complaining or any of that stuff. We don't want to waste our time complaining. We want to be grateful and be open to receiving more, right? Or whatever God
Right.
has to offer us. So yeah,
Yep.
so I liked that exercise a lot. I should do it again because we do get stuck back in our
We
old
do. We'll
patterns.
like kind of get into that. It's
Yeah.
it's so true. And that's something too where like science, as we learn something new and as we work on building awareness, we're actually laying down new pathways in our brain,
Yes.
like physical
Yeah.
neurons are being laid. But that doesn't mean that if we're under stress and overwhelm,
Yeah.
like when the first 6 months of my daughter leaving our house, I mean, she states away from us.
Yeah.
That was really
Oh my
challenging for
God.
me.
Yeah.
Even though I like thought I'd prepared for it, it was way more challenging than I even imagined. And so I saw some old patterns happening
Mm.
in that those 6 months, and I
Yeah.
knew this is because of what
Yep.
I'm going through right now. I
Right.
need to give myself some grace. I need to give my other girls some grace because they're going through missing their sister too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's just recognizing I'm not reverting. I could have very easily gone, I'm reverting. I can't teach anybody about going through this stuff
Right.
because I'm having some of my same old patterns that I went through,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
you sit in that spiral, it's you want to get out of that spiral. And it was like, no, this is because of bigger things out of my control that I'm trying desperately to control and I can't, and I have to
Right.
surrender that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's just important to understand you can make progress and still make mistakes, still have some old patterns come up.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're not growing.
Yeah.
If you continue to take a step forward every day, you wake up every day and you're like, I'm determined to try to be my best today, knowing I'll
Yeah.
make mistakes. That's a huge, huge first step.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I love that. And thank you for saying that because after I tell you that I just like freaked out on Sunday. I mean, I've come a long way and I do believe that though. Like you're still going to fall back into old patterns. I think the most important thing too is like now you have the tools to be able to get yourself out of those old patterns too.
Yeah.
And you recognized it, right? So like before you probably wouldn't have recognized it and now you can
No.
recognize it. And I did too. On Sunday I was like, "All right, this is not me." And I can get out of this and I can fix it and I can try better next time. I mean, because we can't erase the past, but we can apologize and we can move forward, learning something and trying to be better next time to catch
Yes,
yourself beforehand. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. What advice do you have for women out there today, Natalie, that might be dealing with some of this? What would be like a first step?
Yeah. First of all, you're not alone. You're a special person. My life coach told me, you're a special person, but you're not a special snowflake. So you have what you're going through as somebody else is going through.
Hmm.
And the fear of you not being able to change, or even the fear of someone taking your kids, or what they're going to think about you if they knew, that can be really crippling and that can keep you in a
Hmm.
place. And I just want to say, don't stay there.
Yeah.
Reach out to someone you trust. Reach out to, if you're in a church, reach out to a church member you can trust or
Yeah.
a best friend. Seek out help,
Yeah.
and just don't stay stuck.
Yeah. Would you
There's
recommend like getting
absolutely
a
help for you.
therapist or like a counselor at church or a therapist? Would you recommend getting a therapist or what would be, or just finding a friend to talk to would be a good start?
Yeah, I mean, wherever you feel like maybe you're led, like for me, since I'm coaching, I'm like, coaching has been tremendously helpful. We
Mm,
went through it for our marriage. We were in a
yeah.
place where we thought we were going to divorce and went through coaching. I like coaching because it's more forward thinking.
Yeah.
We do have to touch on the past a bit, but we also are looking at how do we make steps forward? How do we
Yep.
make goals and have these progress mindset
Yeah.
shifts?
Yep.
I feel like coaching is more in the mindset shift world, and therapy, absolutely go to therapy, especially if you've had major trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they are going to be able to help you better. But absolutely, I mean, you can come see me.
Yeah.
Um, but the first step at all, just don't stay where you're at.
Right. Right.
Start researching and recognizing you can change. You're
Yeah.
not stuck. I don't care if you're listening to this and your kids are already out of the house. You can
Yeah.
absolutely mend things with your children, go back and, you know,
Yeah.
apologize for, you're starting to learn, oh, this is how I was and that's not how I should have been, and
Yeah.
and mend those things with your kids.
Yeah. What about for people that maybe are thinking about having a child and had like a traumatic childhood or something like that? Would you, because I feel like when you have a kid, all this stuff gets like all your baggage comes up. Does that make any sense? Like, I mean, we don't even know we have these triggers, right? And then you become a parent and then like bam, it's like there. Does that
Right.
sound like normal to you? Like, or is that just me?
Well, it's interesting you say that because, like, for me in my story, when I started to recognize that there was something not quite right with how I was dealing with my anger when it was just me and Mike, I remember being afraid of having children because I was
Yes.
afraid that I would hurt them. It
Yeah.
didn't obviously stop me from it, but
Right.
it was very scary. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. If you have not ever learned how to process, think of other areas in your life if you don't have kids right now. How are
Hmm.
you at work? How are you driving? I had
Yeah.
road rage.
Yeah.
I would get upset with people at the store if they stepped in front of me. I mean, I had some
Yeah. It's just
some
like a really
major,
short temper. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So there was definitely that. Or if you're the opposite where you won't talk about your feelings,
Mm.
you just don't tell anybody how you're actually feeling, you give the silent treatments or whatever it is in that passive aggressive behavior. So just kind of take an inventory. Where am I and how am I with other people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
absolutely, I don't think that whether you have kids or no kids, personal development
It's
is
huge.
only going to benefit
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny though, because like all the moms that I interview, though, I feel like a lot of these businesses, a lot of these, personal development has happened after we have children because we want to be better for them. They
Yeah.
kind of push us to make these changes. Like some of the things that I have done since I had my child, I would have never even thought of probably before
Hmm.
having her. But I'm like, I want to be good for her. I want to show, and be a good example. I want to continue to grow. I want to work hard. I want to do something that has meaning, all of these things. And like, if I had never had my child, I can't say that I would be doing that right now. And even like a lot of the other businesses that, have come about as these women entrepreneurs, a lot of them started from, when they had their children, whether it was, an experience that happens that they struggled with and they wanted to, make something that offers support, or even like OT, PT, all these things. Yeah, so it's just, I find it really interesting and also amazing that our kids really push us to be our best self, right? And
Yeah, there's
get help, or talk to someone, start a business that we've been dreaming of. It kind of kicks us in the butt and is like, all right,
mhm.
yeah, let's do this. Let's, motherhood is not about being held back. It's almost like, more of a shift to go forward and, do big
Yeah.
things.
There's
Yeah.
absolutely no denying that children force us to have to think about somebody else and not ourselves.
Yeah,
Not that there aren't great people out there. I definitely know a few in my own life who do great things without children, but
absolutely.
for the majority, we have kids and it forces us to be like, wait,
Wait a second.
this isn't how I want to behave anymore. In fact, I
Right.
can't if I'm going to survive children.
Right. Right. Or even like,
Yeah.
I don't want my daughter to end up like this. So like, I need to make changes to, be able to be a good example for her to grow up around and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great. Where do you see your business, 5 to 10 years from now, Natalie?
Well, currently I'm writing a book, finally.
Amazing.
So, I don't know, 5 to that's a long ways away.
Yeah.
I hope 10 years from now I'm a grandparent.
Yeah.
It's funny because now I have teens. I mean, I have
Yeah.
13, 16, and 20. In 2 days she'll be 20.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and so I'm just currently working on a bonus module in my program for
Okay.
teenagers and raising teens.
Amazing.
So I don't know, maybe I'll be helping the empty nesters at some point as well.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
really
at
cool.
this point, at this point, I don't plan on quitting coaching, but
Yeah.
we'll see where the Lord leads.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So, where can we find you? I know you told us of your little trigger tracker that we're going to put below. Where is the best place to find you?
I'm at nataliehixson.com. I have a blog post or blog over there, and I'm a little bit on Pinterest. Not really active on Instagram for
Yeah.
business at the moment, but yeah. So, but
That's great.
yeah, nataliehixson.com. You'll find everything you need there.
Okay. Yeah, I will link all of that below so they can find you. And thank you so much again for sharing your story. This was incredible. And I know it's going to help so many people.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Empowerhood is brought to you by Flourish Everyday Coaching. Check them out in the link below. And again, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. If you could take 60 seconds of your time and leave us an Apple review, this helps share the news about this podcast and help women all over the world. If you want to see the video version of this podcast, you can go to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next episode.